inviting me to share. Introduction to the project. It's really, we're at the very like basic planning stages, sans any executive order allowing us to pursue further. We do have the funding for it. We don't have the authority to run it yet, so we're just basically on the conceptual side. But I've already secured about $3.3 million for transaction advisory services for this project. I need to get an order from the president saying go for it. So, this was conceived, and I hope this is not ako sa baka hindi na ako welcome after this, no? After I bastardize your historical monuments with my financial project. This started about 2012. Somebody, as the secretary said, there's a lot of travels going on at the time. So a lot of people start to see hotels that were formerly government offices, formerly government buildings, and that idea started to come saying, don't we have any of these sort of similar assets in the area? So we took a look at our major assets that we had in Metro Manila, and we realized we had actually a lot, especially in the Intramuros area, of nationally government-owned facilities. Because as Kay was mentioning, it's very hard to fund private historical structures. No? So the easiest is government. You have a basis to spend if it's government. So just to go through it, basically the project, what we were thinking is the public-private partnership. So I would work in the PPP office kasi, and it's one of the stranger projects that I've come across on, so I said, yeah, I'll go for it. We're looking at preservation, restoration. These are all catchwords, renewal, but mainly the adaptive reuse portion. Because we realize it can no longer be, and no offense to the National Museum, no, but for something like the post office, hindi pwede yung keep throwing money. Then this Gemma Araneta told us a story of the Metropolitan Theater where buhos ng pera, and then now it's even worse yata than before ng pera, diba? So, ulan also. And then, so we're saying, nako, we have to find a way to keep this thing going because it can't be a bottomless pit of just cash out every time. We need to find a way to keep this thing rolling and relevant to what the public likes to see nowadays. They like to go to malls, they like to walk around, so we need to kind of use that to our advantage. It's an opportunity for us to preserve iconic architecture. The government does not have a lot of money, or it does not prioritize such developments as of the time because there's still the poverty line to contend with, the hospitalization, security, peace and order. So we need to find a way to take this out of the government's hands. And mind you, if you let the government handle the historical structure, chances are it may not be as amazing. It might not even be a structure anymore. It might be an empty lot afterwards.
Which is the case?
Most of the time, no? I admit. And the last thing was to generate revenues for the government. Because all of this, we realized we need a proof of concept. It's been done in other countries, and everyone loves the other countries going, you know, ang ganda ng historical district na. And you never do it here. They talk about it, but they never do anything. So we decided we need to prove a concept to show that can it work, can it not work? Does it work in the Philippines? Because people say, but it works in Europe. The Philippines is a different context. So kami, sige, let's try it out. Kasi malay mo, baka actually, it might be different talaga. The people are different. This is all the legislation you're probably familiar with. This is my standard presentation. So magulo eh. I don't understand actually.
We know number one.
Why there's so many. At first I thought I was looking for one law lang, and then when I did more research, ang daming overlapping. So medyo kalat. I think Kay doesn't like this because it's so. But my favorite my favorite is of course number 7, the Philippine DOT law, because this one does not talk about how to preserve anything. Build, operate, transfer. It's a PPP law basically, but it gives you the ability to do a contract or transaction and then put your own specifications inside. So it's output based. For the government, as I said, the benefit is restoration of iconic architecture. It is on the government's books, so I think the government should be to protect its assets and its asset books. It should actually preserve such assets, if not on an accounting side, you're actually devaluing your assets. The second is to generate revenues, because we want to prove that historical structures can make money and they're not just black holes of money, which is the concept of budget management and a few other people in government. Because to be fair to them, they've seen it happen before where money is thrown in and then nothing ever happens. So we want to show that no, you can make money, not a lot of money, but you can make some money to move it to your next project, just like any other real estate project. The last is to create vibrant urban development into response. Basically, this is for Manila talaga. We realize a lot of the chunk, I'll show you a map later, is government owned, so we want to kind of rebuild this whole area. But the private sector naman, this is the benefit we're selling to them. We're saying it's a novel business concept that takes advantage of historical landmarks because no matter how much money they can have billions of pesos, they cannot build a post office building and say it is the post office. They can make a replica exactly in nicer specs, but the historical value is not there. There's only one post office, there's only one Metropolitan Theater, there's only one National Museum or Senate. You can recreate it, but you will never have that novel. Yeah, that's not. You can't detach it. And the next thing is fast-growing tourism retail. 2012, we were almost top in Asia for GDP growth. Everyone was looking at us na parang, oh, the Philippines yata is coming up. A lot of foreign capital was coming in, so we said, let's tap them. Not just for toll roads, but for the tourism retail industries. Sayang eh. And we invited also a bunch of Singaporeans and Hong Kong groups to come in, hence the articles on Fullerton taking over, to take a look. And they actually said, sabi namin, here, smell the Pasig River. And they said, no problem, because Singapore is more mabaho. We can deal with that. They said, the traffic, how do you like it? Well, the traffic is a bit bad, but if you close off some roads, maybe we can work with this property. Okay. And I mean, they looked at the building and said, this building is nicer than what they have in Singapore, yung Fullerton. It's bigger. And it's not as, inside naman, it's not, I think, historical anymore. Because it's rebuilt and there's mezzanines and fake walls na by post office. They can smash and have a free hand in redesigning the area. So they were actually quite happy with what we had. And a lot of them remembered the Manila Hotel because these are old businessmen and they've stayed in the Manila Hotel. They loved it. In fact, one of the guys who owns one of the top hotel groups in Singapore, was a management emeritus. Was a management trainee in Manila Hotel. So, umiyak siya when he saw it. Like, anong nangyari dito? Diba? Kasi he was there in the peak. And so that's what they're saying. The last one is lease of unencumbered land from the Philippine government. We're going for a lease here. No? We're not intending to sell it or give it away to the private sector. Although in other countries, like the French government, they tend to sell the asset because they have, I guess, so many in their asset register. But for us, konti lang to. We'd like to lease it. We'd like to keep it for the Filipino people. And then just slap restrictions on it and make it very strict. So at the end of the day, it always reverts back. It can always revert back to the government in case the entity in charge is not performing as desired. We presented air traffic data to Malacanang. We were saying, look, all of these countries in Asia have their own historical backgrounds. Chinese have their own Chinese architecture. There's Kamboy, Angkor Wat. Ito yata, Papua New Guinea's the animals. But within 4 hours of the Manila, we have European architecture from back in the colonial days, or at least inspired architecture. Hong Kong doesn't have as much anymore. They've demolished a lot. China is demolishing their old colonial architecture. So, tayo na lang eh. So in a 4-hour span, you have, let's say for Hong Kong alone, this is old data, but this is 100 flights per week, 105 flights per week. Imagine how many people that is, no? Your next stop is Singapore, 126, and then you have Seoul, Korea. Koreans love to come to the Philippines. We're saying, look, there is enough traffic and tourism, and most of these people are probably going to the beach. Why don't we sell heritage also? If people are going to casinos nowadays, why not go to Intramuros? Because of safety, big safety lang. So this is the what we call the initial development area. So this we're going to the project now. I'll tell you 3 buildings we first identified. Then post office, Liwasang Bonifacio, which is a plaza, and the Metropolitan Theater. Originally, it was just the building. And we decided to use this as the test case because it's free and clear. Post office was willing to move out. It was contiguous to each other, apart from the highways and flyovers, which kung masusunod, tanggal na yan.
Yeah.
Pablo actually has a proposal for that.
Ayaw ba, rerouted around.
Yeah.
Tingnan natin. Kasi,
So, I have a question on the Metropolitan Theater. ERAP has signified interest to purchase it. How will that affect the plans?
I'm not sure actually what the legal. I know it's a tripartite agreement on the Metropolitan Theater. The brutal answer is willing to cut it away.
No.
Wala sila. But we were talking with a few people. I don't remember their names anymore, but they were HCS yata and other. They said this is some sort of a black hole daw kasi it's like a road to nowhere. Parang back in the day, di ba, art was like a mecca, you'd go there to the theater. Kaya siya na push back on the side. So,
That's Pablo.
for modern development daw, you want to have it, you have to include it, if not, it will not survive on its own. So, we'll take the risk, no? We'll see what the bidders are saying. So, this is our area. Initially, it was basically this, and this theater. And then we realized, wait lang, you can build a hotel, but people will not stay if there's no attraction. So you have to build that attraction also. You cannot rely on Intramuros as of the moment because it's too messy and the land titles are not consolidated. They can't do a major development immediately. You have a piece in our situation. Sabi namin, okay, let's put together this as the main chunk for sure, and let's find out if we can also get up to here, which I then found out this is government, National Press Club, Immigration's government, and I think the one in the middle is private part. Or
It's a colonial
Chamber of Commerce.
Chamber of Commerce, so baka government din. Sige, sabi namin, let's get this whole area inside so that the guests here can have a way to go in, and it's continuing development of whoever will lease this. They can then walk into Intramuros from here. Kasi kung dito lang sila, it might be a psychological thing na I won't cross the road because it doesn't look as nice on that side. So we're saying, let's do this. This is our proof of concept. We want this to kick off sana and show that, okay, within this area, kaya. And then, we move on to...
Can you just go back to the image? Because you mentioned initial, no?
Yeah.
Can I just say, because I'm going to have a chance to say it, that catchment might want to cross the river to Escolta.
Pedestrian bridge.
A pedestrian bridge. Just something, just to consider, because that gives the tourist visitor more places to see.
Pwede.
Of great visual interest.
In fact, I think partly we want, but this is, I think on one part, no, this is a government na, this Jones Bridge.
So we wanted to add a pedestrian bridge on one luna. No, the left side. Left side, no, left. Yeah, no, too much. Okay. One luna.
Sorry,
Yes. So kasi this one's been restored and an lugar is here. So it would actually connect Binondo to Intramuros. So this would actually be a
Yeah. Agree. So,
pedestrian. It's a pedestrian bridge, not a motor bridge.
pedestrian.
Garden pedestrian bridge, actually.
Yeah, but it has to be pedestrian.
However you can connect, no? Kasi I'll show you in a map. So, more nostalgia, here's your post office building na napakaganda. And it's a post office. But it's actually, and I believe the foreign business groups who came here, they actually like this building better than the others they found in Asia. So, don't kill me, I just did slight research pero correct me if I'm baka mali ako dito. 1926 siya.
No problem.
No, I don't know. So, this
Yeah,
is
Butch
specs.
will know the dates.
I didn't know where, because I just do whatever. Pero, we're looking at, the floor area is big, 22,000 with 5 floors, 1 basement, 2 mezzanine. That's actually, what, 10 stories, about 3 meters, 1 story. Medyo malaki siya. So, it's good for commercial. It's old pictures, you've probably seen this. We wanted also to take Liwasang Bonifacio, which is about 13,000. We want to create garden for the hotel. So, kick out all the UV Express and jeepneys. And then put little coffee shop. You can put a coffee shop on the side. We're thinking we're allowing development on the sides for a little commercial space, but not high rise. No? So everything goes back to the theme of the area, which is the Art Deco design.
This one.
Neoclassical, sorry. Neoclassical design. We want everything to look the same. So hindi pwedeng, you can have something modern, but you need to mirror the project anchor, which is this. If it is an eyesore and it does not blend with that, then it's not allowed. So you have to think, private sector, as their theory, find a way to design it that the whole thing looks like one big property. I'm gonna fast forward, that's your favorite building, which I don't have a lot size or floor area. I have no idea about this one. 1920s still yan. So, sayang.
I think NCA has that.
There's information. Don't worry. There's information available in the
We'll check, though. We'll check. One of the directives of NCMS now, the staff, which I think I'm responsible for, is to catalog all the records that we have in NCCA. So I'll try to look.
Someone to hire.
Yeah, we'll hire someone to actually inventory all the studies that have been made.
Now, what we call the integrated development site. Basically, if that's your post office building and that was the project area, we're saying all of this is actually government. Well, majority of what you find inside this shape is government, especially in Trumuros. Sabi namin, over time, maybe this is you can call this a 100-year plan. Over time, everything here is government. So why not proclaim the entire thing, plan this in relation to as if you can develop and prepare the whole area over a span of so many years. Because if not, whatever you put on the documentation here may not jive anymore with how this grows is. So to protect the investment here and here, especially for this part, this is free and clear land, we wanted to set the tone already na this is heritage. So everything you build here, be it an office tower, must take into consideration your heritage behind. So you can't make it dikit buildings. You have to have line of sight of so many spacing in between. So that there's a mix.
Already Manila in
there should be a mix naman. But Manila, it's not LGU. There's a distinction between national government owned and LGU. If the national government owns it, the LGU actually has no claim on land. Although they can say within our development land use plan, dapat ganito ganyan. Pero ownership talaga national government at the end of the day. So we need to include LGU. So this is what we're saying. Eventually, we want the whole area to look almost similar and redevelop to the point na this is our anchor here. This is will prove the concept, and then the virus or the bug then spreads over here, and then here you start going modern again, but in the same theme as your bigger chunk. That's the theory. Whether or not mangyayari, we don't know.
And there's a will, there's a way.
That's right. So this administration, next administration. We took a look also at the big picture. No? We zoomed out again from Google Maps, and we realized, wait lang we have your Escolta Binondo Air, which is mostly private sector, and they're doing something already. Naunahan pang gobyerno, usual. Sorry. Gobyerno. Ma-record eh. Naunahan yung gobyerno na naman. Wala naman trabaho pagkatapos. Naunahan na naman yung gobyerno. They started with Escolta. So they're doing the Mega World yata started something there. Okay, so don't get hurt, but at least somebody started something because nobody wanted to make the first move. Eh. Pero we're hoping that even if there's some collateral damage to a building, it will force the government to react in such a way that it will start pouring money into the assets that are in their control. Because as long as it's in private and it's done well, they'll say, well, private is taking care of it. Hayaan mo na sila. Our assets here, hayaan mo na rin. They don't see it on the books. We're then looking, this is just additional Ross Boulevard redevelopment to the second mall. We also have another big chunk here of government land. CCP area, actually, this is mainly government. And then you have your CBD where most of the people who actually have traveled and was clear naman, but most of the people who have the money and the head offices to spend are found here. So it's actually not that far. No? That's the theory.
Finance naman is not gonna go the reclamation project.
Ay, hindi. I don't think reclamation.
Ah.
Panira ng view ng
Very
Department
good.
of Finance building.
Pero are you doing anything with like Ermita Malate area?
No, we're strictly on what assets are NG, which ones are easier to handle. Kasi, again, we're not out to save, we're not out to save the world, but we're out to prove a concept. That's the theory in the DOF. We need to prove that it can work, and then people will start taking on more interest, and then we can start going full steam. Because if we start just going on to single buildings, mahirapan na. We need to kind of get this ball rolling first. This is a distinction I'd like to highlight. We're looking, a lot of people are saying, oh, yung culture and heritage should be here. So we're saying, wait lang, kasi baka magulo. I don't know the sentiment in this room, but for us, in theory, we're thinking, maybe this could be a heritage hub, and this can be the culture hub. So modern art, modern things can be done here, your theater, place, so that you don't also contaminate and try to put too much into one area. You don't try to put too many requirements. You want to save culture and heritage. Let's segregate so that we have a higher chance of success. Let's do heritage here, let's do culture here. We also don't want these two areas to compete against each other. So that it's not a cannibalistic sort of project. Because if government were saying, in theory, to successfully build out all of this and then all of this, magko-compete yan. And at some point, this guy is losing always at the end of the day because Makati, the people are willing to spend most of the money, and most of the money made here this is nearer, one Bundia rather than there. Lugi siya. So ayaw namin na it might self-destruct. This was a task force formed in 2012. The chairman was DOF. DOT was part of it. City of Manila, which Gemma was representing Fred Lim. Now, I haven't convened this after Fred Lim got removed. NCCA, NHCP, Felipe De Leon and Maris Jokno are actively fighting in the boardroom. But it's interesting to see the two academics argue, and I get a good history lesson every time they sit in the room together. Very good. But I'm sure they like each other. No. Camera feed. And then you have your postal because they're the occupants of the building. And then the privatization management office is an agency of the DOF whose main job is really to privatize assets. This was the former APT dealing with Marcos assets and whatever properties we were disposing of. So they have a legal authority to dispose of assets. But we're not going to use it to dispose these assets.
I noticed the National Museum was not involved with the...
Initially, no?
Yeah.
So this is the initial, this is 2012. In our new proposed executive order, we're including National Museum, GSIS, because GSIS owns a lot of properties in the area currently. And a few other groups, I don't have the copy somewhere. But barely expanded it to include National Museum.
Will there be private sector like ICOMOS and HCS represented in the task force?
On the onset, we're thinking not yet. But once we have, because this is just a task force that was formed to look into. But I'll tell you what the transaction will try to look like later on, and then that's where the other groups can come in for it. But we're not yet sure kung papayagan kami o hindi. Kasi we can always expand the membership to all the servers. But we want to make sure that go ba to o hindi. Kasi if not, invite. This is just another tasking workflow. Actually, there's fairly a lot to do. There's architectural plans and comprehensive development plan. I stayed away from master development plan because I realized in government, when you say master development plan, hindi nangyayari. So, change the nomenclature. Baka we won't best malas. So we're going for preservation first. That's our primary. Then we go for planning. And then we do for the restoration. So those are the three things we're thinking of right now based on our limited knowledge in the Department of Finance. So we want authentic historicity. We want the environment of the old and the new to be balanced, but we want mostly the old environment for heritage. we also want to balance the history and the adaptive response, because face it, we cannot also save every single pillar of the building if that pillar will reduce the income of the private sector by so much. So we're thinking, let's strike a balance. Kahit papano, maybe we can sacrifice, this may be taboo, so maybe we can sacrifice something, a little bit of something, so that we can make sure that the project will succeed and is sustainable. That's the collateral damage. That's the realistic view na we're taking. Ideally, we save the whole, whatever is historical. But in case we need to make a choice, we would rather move on the side of sustainability na lang. That's from our perspective. And then we have restoration of iconic buildings, and then the urban decay. So we go through that segment. It's just a view of the task flow. So actually, there's a fair amount of work. Basically, we want to get transaction advisors. So this is what I'm saying: $3.3 million that we have is from the PP Center's PDMF fund. This is a government utilized fund, worth about $60 million. So we managed to get approved for $3 million. We're going to prepare a concept note. We're going to have to get the legal basis to undertake the project. We want to include, this is a standard of, we have an implementing agency, which is the DOF and PMO. And then in the hard part is, if the bid is unsuccessful, we have to reimburse the $3 million. So we're taking a risk also. It's not free money for us to just spend. The fund is designed to revolve, so you can recreate more projects in the future. So the DOF does have to take this back. The goals of the master plan are basically this. So we need to frame the area, which is why we took the larger area. We said, let's frame this as this all government. It's within walking distance of each other. Frame it, and then create two plans. You have one, which is an urban redevelopment plan. So one team will handle that. This is, although in the same team, no? One team is dedicated to the urban redevelopment. One team is dedicated to technical preservation. The theory behind that is, if you get the master planner team leader to plan for both, his bias might show, or he might get, there might be complication, because on the one hand, the goal is to create a successful bid. On the other hand, it's to save historical buildings and or their authenticity. He might start sacrificing one over the other, and then you'll get this jumble because yung objectives are two-pronged. So ang sinabi namin, let's separate. One guy just thinks about the best case scenario for urban development with consideration to historical structures, but not bias to historical structures. So he'll just pretend we must preserve, but if we have to smash, we'll smash. Ganun na lang. Let's do this one-track mind. But one guy on this hand, the technical preservation specs guy, is in charge of preserving the structure 100%. So he doesn't care ngayon about development. If it loses money, wala akong pakialam. Basta the goal is this. And then we marry the two after. Para the output is pure. We get a pure objective of what needs to happen. Then we marry. Government then comes and sit down with the committee, NHCP, National Museum, everyone. And then we'll say, alin ba dito yung, well, yung what can we sacrifice and what should we not sacrifice here? Because they might have, at the end, they might have different outputs. They might say, hindi pwede. This guy say, pwede, kailangan mo smash. If not, if you combine these two kasi, he'll start doing trade-offs on his own. When the final report comes to you, it's different already. So we separated this. And then lastly is the draft bid documents on the concession agreement and the minimum performance standard. So we're saying for the private sector, it's not so much that you need to preserve, but there are outputs you need to provide us. So you must have, let's say, public access for the area. Just because it's private doesn't mean you can lock out the public from entering. You must create it to a certain integrity, so then you specify. So this is the document that will really help the environment or give the feel of the area. In Hong Kong, we noticed that the technical preservation specifications is very thick. They even specify the methodology of preparing a certain slab of Shanghai plaster down, and they will specify the ingredients and the mix of how you are to restore this. But the Hong Kong Antiquities Office is actually staffed with 7 multi-degree engineers, master's degree, PhD, civil engineer, architecture, preservation, and they're highly paid. So I don't think we have that in the Philippines, in the government. Yeah. So magaling sila. And the government actually did it on their own. So, but kami, we don't have the money, so we're going to use the PDMF fund. We're going to get a team of, I think there was 14 on my list of planners and transactional buyers, including finance people and legal people, to do these things. We will try to specify as specific as possible, but we think that it's not practical to specify down to that level of this slab of tile on the floor, this exact one must be to this specifications. Masyadong, I think it's too detailed. I think we should just find the balance na lang, so that we don't also scare away our private sector partners.
Who gets to select who will be on the team?
This is a bid. So what happens is in the bid is you have the specified people. So you have a master planner, principal architect, technical preservation architect.
Will there be a mechanism to check if the planner or the architect is actually heritage architect?
Yeah.
We're very
Scary,
afraid of
yeah.
that.
Very scary.
They're afraid
Yeah.
of Mr.
Okay. Don't worry, because in our terms of references, we specified the experience required and the level of project amounts that's been done, and they are required to submit, just like any urban planner for a development. We specified, I think for the master planner, 5 projects within the last 10 years relating to historical preservation or that sort of project.
What if the planner actually says that he did heritage projects? How will you verify?
I'm sorry.
If the planner claims to have done heritage projects, how do you verify if he actually did?
They submit documents now about their
Who will check?
projects.
Who will check?
PPP Center, PPP Center, the public-private partnership that runs the bid. On the team is the committee, including the Department of Finance.
It has to be heritage groups. I'm sorry to say. It has to be certified heritage groups.
Yeah,
like
because
us.
I
Ang
mean,
dami-daming fake.
yeah, because a lot of people can fake their records
Yeah.
with regard to heritage.
I don't want to mention a famous architect who passes himself off as a
But it
heritage
starts
expert.
with letter.
I mean, we'll see how that mechanism works.
You don't want to, but you feel you must.
We'd like to have.
They said there's big money here at Prestige.
So we'd
I
like
could,
to have.
all imagine
Somebody.
No,
Whoever that person
Just one little thing, you were saying something about specs.
Yes.
If you're dealing with a heritage structure, I'm afraid you have to be spec oriented.
Yes.
If it's a specific never mind the tile because that's a decorative item, but specific formulas you mentioned, it has to be this. Yes, I'm afraid so. It has to be that if you are dealing with with a heritage structure, because there is such a thing as compatibility of materials.
Right.
If you restore
Right.
with a material that is not compatible to the original,
Yes.
you're asking for trouble.
That's right.
And the
So
bench
the
of,
specs, you have to take that into consideration.
the bench of heritage architects in Philippines actually is very, very limited. So we're afraid that not just anybody might apply.
Sorry, I forgot to mention, this is an international bid. We're looking at AROP, AECOM, that sort of level of planners. And the team that comes in is international. There are very few, and when you say international with international experience, hindi lang pwede national. Our national experience here is quite limited. We are actually bidding this out for the advisory services overseas.
But it's open to local.
It's not a bid where people just come and say I'd like
It's
to join.
invited.
There's a short list of an advisory firm. The main guy really here is the usual law firm, accounting firm, consultancy firm, because these guys are really, the objective here is the bid at the end of the day. These form part of the bid, but the real objective is the bid. So in order to meet these requirements, they have to hire certain people. That's where the architects go to. So they go to a person like AROP or ICOM or to McKinsey. So we screen their resumes and their achievements. It has to be verifiable. that's a requirement. If we cannot verify, that's an X. At the same time, McKinsey and these big names will also have to verify the consultant they want to put on the bid as their submission, because if we find out that hindi pala siya marunong, that's a hit to their reputation. So we're also banking on the fact that these big firms are not going to sacrifice, or they're going to do their due diligence on the people that they're going to submit as part of their suggested bid roster. So there should be safeguards in place to make sure that we don't get just anybody. We should get the best. That's why when I requested for budget, initially usually the budgets are between $800 to $1 million. I said no, give me 3, because that's how much you normally pay a person like Arab or a based on what I've seen in Europe. So I said give us 3 para we get the big guys talaga to come in and do this right. If we're going to do it, we're going to do it right. If not, we're not going to do it all na lang. Kasi one piece lang yun. So wala pa naman, don't worry. We have no approval, but this is the theory of what outputs we want as context.
Let me say, there are details, suggested details that need to be worked out. But let me just say, overall, one word for this is bravo, really. Because, I've seen a lot of, government initiatives and proposals, but this is one that really understands the value of the authenticity of the context, and also proposes an actual practical program. It's not blue sky. There's pragmatic involved, and I must say, although of course we're grateful to NCCA for being there to speak about the value of authenticity and cultural significance, but here really is, amazingly, the Department of Finance, able to elucidate, to outline really what really are those values, why they're valuable, and really, I think this is really going to be a kind of blazing of the trail, as far as how the government sees our architectural heritage. Because in many ways, we witness it many times that government, whether local, not so much national, but a lot of local, sees architectural heritage as something that is a waste of the land it sits on. But here you're saying that, this is valuable because of what sits on that land.
Right, that's exactly what you're saying. Thanks for that. Again, for the main area, actually, just to also make sure I don't create enemies after this presentation.
Okay.
Technical, we actually put on our document the technical, because in the bid you have financial, you have technical. For a toll road, you're looking at financial, because how much money will the private sector pay you for the license to operate the toll road and then generate revenue. In this case, we're saying no, we go for technical, because the financial, we don't care about it as much. They can pay us anything that is 1 peso over, is good for the government, because actually, if you think about it, negative kami on the asset, because you're pouring out money to pay for the kuryente, the water, the maintenance, the operating expenses. We're always negative. So anything 1 peso over 0 is a benefit to us. So we said, yun nga, let's balance the two. This is what we're saying, and that's why we try as much as we can to make sure that we don't mess up the asset. That's only one asset. We also had a plan at one point for the customs house in ILOILO, ADUANA. Pero this is taking a bit longer. This may not see. This is an active customs use bill here right now. But the concept notes being drafted, mirroring what we have for the post office. So this is nothing we've identified. Thankfully, as long as the government occupies it, it should still be okay kasi active customs office. Foreign precedents. This is what really drove us to kind of go through and talk to other officers and talk with UK, Hong Kong, Singapore, Korea, Japan on their experience of and then this is what kicked us in. The main one was Fullerton. This is really, and I'll give you more details later on. Converted in 2001, sold to Sinoland, which is a Hong Kong company, worth $400 million. Singapore, so it's roughly also about $400 million US dollars. Invested for with 400 million. Sorry, invested for refurbishment. The actual sale price is on the lower side. Post office in New Zealand. We have that also, $230 million New Zealand dollars. Carlisle Post Office UK, that's about 750,000 asking price. If not that great, I guess. We have the German one. This is the Post Palais in Berlin. I think this is done by now, 2012. Chicago Post Office is proposed. I don't know if this is, I didn't verify anymore if this is done. But we're saying local, it has happened. Again, this is because we're post office and we're thinking post office, post office. So we said we took this out. And then we looked further of other projects. Sorry po, I'll go back. Yeah. So this is naman mixed use. You have buildings and heritage in the area. So more details. So we said let's look at the region. Hindi naman kalaban yung Europe. So that's far. But we say who are our competitors in the region for this sort of structure. Singapore is the nearest. The Fullerton building, which is I think that's a before. This is an after. It's probably an after for both. This was built as $4.1 million, commissioned in 1919. It had the Singapore Club, which is actually a very famous club, Import-Export Department, and the Japanese military headquarters. The Japanese loved it though, so they took it over as their headquarters. The hotel has 400 rooms, parking for 350 slots, 15 conference rooms. The land area is 41,000 square meters. Height is 36, so similar to ours. 9 floors. We have cost here, we say 300 after. And we did more research. About 300. The problem though with this one is because it was a grade A listed structure, they couldn't smash the walls. So you have, I think, 100 kinds of room configurations, which the owner of the property saying, hirap. One room is smaller but uses the same air conditioning. The other room is bigger but uses the same air conditioning. When the Singaporeans came over, and most of them were the losing bidders for this, they looked at the post office hotel and they said, can we smash the wall? I said, well, that's a false wall, so gypsum board it. When they said, okay, that's good because then you can create more uniform spaces and actually give more rationality to the space and preserve the facade and the internal structures. And then you can do what you want. So it's more flexible as a building rather than this one. Nahirapan talaga daw dito for this. The other one is the Marine Police Headquarters in Hong Kong. I'm sure you've seen this one. The Hong Kong government actually told me that this was, to them, a failed structure because it was so, what they put inside, high, expensive shops, was not conducive to people going there and just hanging out.
Is that the one where you have a tree sitting on
Yeah,
those?
I'll show you in a bit. It's 1884, that's why it's called Heritage 1884. I just put this para matuwa yung mga tao. First flushing toilet in Kowloon. Roundhouse Sigma Tower, it had the fire station. So this is your fire station, that's your barracks. There were trees. They also said this is failed because they cut a lot of trees. And they said, if they could do this again, they would require more trees to have been either earthballed or preserved. And at the same time, they would have regulated what actually goes into the property for development.
But they still own the property. Or they sold it to the developer.
If they sold this one. They sold this one. It's not commercial. That's what it is now. So I think you've all seen this in Hong Kong. They've cut a lot of trees. They made it quite nice actually. When you look at it, it's very nice. This is Shanghai Tang, the fire station of Shanghai Tang. This is a hotel by the luxury hotels group. But they only kept a few trees along. The shops are all expensive, RTA.U. That's what Antiquities of saying now. Had they gotten a second chance, they would have banned this from being there. Because only the Chinese mainland tourists would come and only the people who would spend money would go there. So yung coffee shop there was charging 70 Hong Kong dollars for coffee. Which is like almost $10 for coffee. So the locals, which is their heritage structure, could not enjoy it and sit down because it was prohibitively expensive. So that actually got us thinking also, how do we balance that for our property? It will be a 5-star hotel because that's really the people who can afford it. But how do you also make sure that you have a 5-star hotel in the area or 5-star development in the area, but require the person to actually take into account the regular people on the street to be able to sit down, enjoy the park, enjoy this new development in our own country. We don't want it to be gentrification and kick out everybody. But we do need their money. That's the important thing. Sila yung mayaman, we have the money to do it. But we have to make sure we do it. That's a before and after. Maraming trees na putulang. Sayang, but when you look at it, actually it's quite nice. So can't say much because we don't have it in our country.
Shanghai lang is nilalangaw there.
Wala, nobody knows.
Nobody knows the
Here are the parameters. Sorry, it's a 50-year grant. Nobody buys land pala in Hong Kong. 50-year grant, land grant. The winning bid was 2.2 billion pesos for this property. That means paid to the government, 2.2. That's cash for the government. Capex, they have to commit. They committed a capex of 4.2 billion pesos, 650 million. So we can actually also put that in our bid, saying you must spend 5 billion pesos for the whole development, so that we make sure that hindi sila kukuripot also. That's what they did in Pagcor. That's why you have very nice casinos, because to get the license, the minimum amount you have to put down, guaranteed investment is $1 billion per casino license. Hindi nila maubos. So that's why it's all out. The most expensive, whatever, the most expensive this and that. Because you have to spend, within 3 years, they have to put cash down $1 billion in 3 or 5 years. And then you run your casino. If not, you lose your license. So we're thinking also along those lines, na parang how do we hold these private sector people by the neck, no? Kasi we don't want to be the ones na hostage. It's our property, tas tayo pang hostage. Gusto namin, sila hostage. Okay, sorry camera. We want them to actually just do what we need to do and protect the structure. Because again, we only have one. We don't want, it's not like we can issue another license again. The most recent, I just added this today now. I don't know if you're familiar, Peninsula Parish just opened last year in August. Built in 1906, converted in 1936. Headquarters of the German military high command. Reopened as a hotel after 6 years of restoration. This 4 years of actual restoration. This one, I have a video, actually a friend of mine has a video of the peninsula and how they restored this. They gold leafed a wall. It took them like, there was like 3 people in the whole of Europe who knew how to do it. They pulled them in and they took out.
The fort is this.
The fort is here, so you can totally. They really spent like months now on each pillar. They were gold leaf because the government said required this must be gold leaf. Gold leaf. No, you can't use gold paint or spray paint. Gold leaf. And the result is they sold it for $460 million, and they spent 338 million euros. So roughly about. Where's my math? Sorry, UF can't do math. Let's exchange rate. We're looking at a few. It's 330, 21, 400 million dollars, so 18 billion pesos. That's how much they spent on this property. Restoration took 6 years. They have 200 rooms, 34 suites. Again, this proves to us that people are willing to pay for the structure because of not because of the structure itself, but for the historical value that structure carries. They're not buying the structure because it's concrete or marble, but they're buying the history, and they're willing to pay. That's what they realize. They're willing to pay. So sa atin, why can't we do that as well? And they're willing to put in money. That's the important part. This is 18 billion pesos that they put in for this hotel. And you're trying to think, we're trying to figure out, how do you make your money back? You spent 338 million. Apparently, kampante sila that to make their money back.
Because it's nice,
And then they had stone masons come in daw and redo all of this to kind of make it back to normal. Ang galing eh.
You know what's interesting about this? That here, what you're suggesting is really an outlier concept.
Yeah.
You know, it's a fringe concept.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking about very in other places. It's such common sense that you can't, you cannot take away the history of the historic center of a city. There'll only be one historic center of a city, and the rest of the world values that, and does what it can to use it. But here, and so I think it's brilliant. It's a government agency, the Department of Finance, that is taking on this role of outlier, to bring in this common sense from outside the country here to make it happen. Because I mean, it's really, to be an outlier also means you also need to have the wherewithal to enable your concept to take place. So I think it's really wonderful.
It's just a matter of when we did our research. Actually, we just realized that pwede pala. So actually, kami at first, we were saying, this is another crazy plan. of the government. Patayin na to or something, wasting time. Then minsan, dala-dala din. Then realize,
Yeah, that's the common way of thinking, that just because it's a heritage building, that it's nilalangaw and that there are ghosts.
Luma,
You know, so they cannot perceive something becoming like that because they think it's luma na, and that they have to tear it down. And that's, I think, what we all work for here, because it is possible to make the Metropolitan Theater a 6-star hotel, or even the post office. I don't see why not.
What makes it happen is that luma na yan. That's why we're having that's why it's so brilliant, because it's luma.
and the history behind it, there's always a change of hands. So parang at first you're thinking, baka magalit yung heritage people, kailangan gawing museum.
No.
Hindi. Because sa kanila,
Para sa amin, basta mababae.
quarter, Japanese theater.
Just a very quick case in point. There was this beautiful building that we were trying to save in San Marcelino. It was Juan Arellano, and it had the largest sculpture of Francesco Monti. We tried to save it for, Ivan, how long were we there? In the Monty thing, in one Meralco, over almost 2 years, right? And they were just like talking through their noses, etc., etc. Well, one fine day, when Yolanda came, despite all the measures that we took, they smashed it.
They said, Yolanda, get the...
No, all the attention was on Yolanda, they just smashed it. And it was the biggest sculpture of Monty, and the ceilings had like peacock stucco decoration where the eye of the peacock on the tail was bright with the light, and it was beautiful. And they were going to make McDonald's.
Very good.
And now, wala. The lease expired, so wala nang Monty, wala pang McDonald's. It's just an empty space now.
Kami gusto namin as authentic as possible. I mean, if you sans any data that we have on the finance, and it's usually the private sector that tells naman is it affordable now. But for us, our default position is, sige, preserve it first and then figure out. Kaya we added the empty spaces on the side. Kasi para we don't also sacrifice. Kasi we don't want to be put to a position that we have to say, hindi, sige, tanggalin mo na lang yan. Kasi
Basta
you have excess land eh.
important that you're guided well. Because there are many times that people, many times people have a kind of a closed mind that, oh yeah, that is blocking the way, gibain yan, you know. But there are creative ways to deal with things that, in a sense, might be seen as obstructions or, you know, or fragments, you know, so to speak. You know.
Which is in our limited view, we said, instead of getting into that area where, kasi the private sector think of profit and this, if I take this out, it will generate X amount million more. If I leave this, it will generate less amount million more. So we said, wag na lang ganyan, let's get more land. And then if he says, can I smash it kasi kulang ako 5 billion, we'll just say, oh, you use this free land na lang. You make your money na lang there, don't touch that.
And also a mantle over this whole thing is the aspect of nation building. I mean, because a project like what you're talking about really contributes to this whole notion of nation building.
Right.
May I say something in relation to that? I wonder if I can say something more about the whole area. Not because we're coming out with a book now, Architectural Heritage of Manila, 1571-1961. Now, we have a chapter in Ermita, and this is located in Ermita. When we were thinking about what to say about Ermita, we realized actually the Americans had conceptualized this whole area from post office to City Hall to the National Museum area to Rizal Park, to Luneta, all the way to Manila Hotel as a civic center. In other words, it was to be the Philippine equivalent of the civic center in Washington, D.C. In other words, it would be a place where the emerging Philippine nation would celebrate itself. Pero ang nangyari, after the war, somehow this concept was lost. But in fact, there is no civic center for the entire country. That, in a sense, that contributes to the weakness of the sense of self that we Filipinos have. That's why I wish this project could be located in relation to that civic center that is yet to be. I don't see any connection that you have made with Rizal Park. So nandun yung post office, Rizal Park. Walang connection. Actually, it should really be one continuous strip like the mall in Washington, D.C. Kasi nandun na Intramuras, fine, but you also have this area, the outside, where the nation celebrates. Wala eh, sayang. And I really wish, instead of just thinking of a hotel, you might like to think of other possibilities. Because there is no place in the whole country where you can see the products of the country. Whether it be furniture, or animation, or electronics, wala eh. I wish perhaps part of the hotel, part of this building could be a national exhibition hall or something.
But you are in the complex of museums. You are in the complex of the National Art Gallery, the National Museum of Natural History, and the Museum of the Filipino People, which should be renamed to the National Museum of Anthropology. So there's a kind of
And perhaps the private sector can benefit from exhibiting their
We
products.
have a CCP area. Again, we go back to the theory. You have your heritage area because of Intramuros, and then you have your cultural area, which is CCP. Kasi pwede mong...
All of them have heritage actually. CCP is also heritage.
We made the distinction lang and forgive me for this, but we said Intramuros is much older than the CCP complex. So we tried to segregate para walang cannibalism. Kasi at the end of the day, when we bid both out, we don't want it to compete with each other.
They will not compete.
And then naturally, they can grow on their own. Pero again po, we want to prove the concept. We want to try, and that's why also we did make it so large, because to get all the titles to the properties, to get all the agencies to move out and find them replacement offices, tedious yan eh. And we're not saying that we're not willing to do the work, but we're saying in one administration, you only have so many years. You go for the quick win, and then you prove the concept, and then you go for the bigger target later on.
You know, the idea of the concept. I do sense that, you know, have a strong concept.
Yeah.
You know, a strong concept there, a strong concept here. But then within that area of the strong concept, you can have things that sort of go against that concept. But if as long as they, you know, they still contribute to the whole of that, it will be okay.
I'm concerned about, yes, tourism is important. I mean, I was in tourism before now, but is that the only thing we can say about this area to attract tourists, the hotel? I'm not even sure whether that's a good place for a hotel, given the traffic in Manila.
Neither are we. So our base case scenario is hotel, but the advice will come in, actually will come up with 5 modalities or 5 suggested outcomes. The first being the most commercial, the last being the most conservative, which is museum normally. In Hong Kong, that's what they did. They have 5 options. You have the very profit-making one, the very not profit-making one, then you have something where in between. And kami naman, we're also thinking, it's not all government, there's private land. If we jumpstart it, the private sector might get a nudge, and then you can have your exhibition and everything. Because we don't expect the government to honestly spend for the whole area. It's not gonna happen.
No, but why don't you open it to a nationwide competition, the best use for post office? You might get the best ideas of it. That's what they do, for example, in Spain. That's why their modern architecture is exciting, because national competition or international competition.
Yeah. The
National competition.
The consultant naman is free to, they're required to do public consultation to get more ideas also. So,
No, iba yung competition.
yeah.
Make it a competition for the best possible.
And see
Well,
if you can come up with a concept paper and then bring it up with the board and ask NCC to fund
Yeah.
Just like the Rizal
kami
Monument.
Yeah.
we just get
Yeah.
the money.
Yeah, you consult and fine, but you know, I believe in the strength of different opinions. If you get a competition, lalabas yung creativity, I think.
Actually, that's why we were grateful that si Miss Gemma was there, because she was our only link into the Maris and Felipe. There were our links into the history. We don't know.
Pero civic center siya. I mean, let us remember that was the whole purpose. The stretch of that.
So we'll go back to balancing on this opportunity. So just a few more. Dining hall, they started kasi ating gold leafing. Gold leaf. And then they made a pool. Kasi I didn't think they could make a pool and, you know, parang di kaya nila.
Yeah, a few months a year. Cool talaga.
Sa atin pa din. Once a year. Season.
Oo, nagiging pool yung
So
basement.
okay naman siya.
Natural water.
So thank you very much.
Very good. Great.